You are listening to another edition of Block Report Radio with the Minister of Information, J.R. Today, our guest is Gerald Pereira, who is a writer and someone who has lived in Libya and traveled extensively throughout the country. We're going to be talking about the newest U.S. war front, that one being opened up in Africa and Libya. Gerald, since the last time I've talked to you, Obama has authorized the U.S. military to drop bombs on Libya. What is your viewpoint of Obama authorizing this? Some people say it was an illegal authorization. But what is your viewpoints first on the fact that President Obama, the first black president in the United States, dropped bombs on Libya?
Yes, I think this is sad because, to be honest with you, JR, I think deep down, I think President Obama is a very decent human being. But I think that his policy towards Africa and his policy toward Libya has been hijacked or is being influenced by the neocons, And I think that he's just, I don't think that he's really I think there are more powerful forces behind this. If anybody understands the nature of the system in the United States, I think this is crystal clear that I think the president has become a prisoner of very powerful forces that people, an invisible government, and who are not elected by the people, and regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans are in, these are the people who shape foreign policy. And I think the president, again I said it, I think he's a very decent person, but I think he's, I'm not into the bashing of President Obama. I know there's a lot of contradictions here, but there's very powerful forces, and I think the neocons are behind this.
Well, what do you think about Sarkozy, the president of France, calling really loudly for this campaign, which was led by the United States and France and other Western powers? But what do you think about Sarkozy being as vocal as he has when he had a relationship with the Gaddafi family and also the Libyan people?
First of all, I think that the relationship that Sarkozy and France had with Libya is just one of convenience. I mean, it was all about oil and France's strategic interests, because France is interested, in taking Libya and those countries from the upper part of Africa out and put it into what is called a Mediterranean bloc, right? What they're hustling here to do is to redivide the carve up Africa, to break up the integrity. They don't want a Pan-African project. They want to break Africa up. And there are people, this is true, there are people in parts of North Africa, parts of Northern Africa, and in the Arab world who is committed to this. So, I mean, Sarkozy relationship, people like Sarkozy always wanted Gaddafi to go. They always wanted to destroy that revolution. But I think they were coming from, they realized at the end of the day they had to deal with Gaddafi because Gaddafi has support at home. And that, you cannot compare Gaddafi to some other regimes in the area. So they have to do business with them, and, Libyan oil is important.
Well, what do you think about the relationship that they said that Libya, or is it not true, that they said that Libya actually contributed to the campaign of Sarkozy and also the president of Italy?
Yep.
Is that true? As well as I know they dump a lot of money into the economy of England by way of a lot of Libyan students going to study abroad. And, of course, the regime in Libya pays for their education.
Well, I've heard statements that, statements made by Saif Islam Gaddafi and a few others. But this is what I do know. I think it was, if I remember, I think Marx once said that capitalists will tend for the rope to execute their mother. I think, all those people are interested in is everything is about money, everything is about economics, it's about oil and business. And when it comes, they can, they are not principled. These are not principled people. And I think, Gaddafi and the Libyan revolution understand these facets, these features of these people's mindset. I mean, for example, when Libya paid compensation for the Lockerbie bombing, they said we paid it. We took the thing, but we didn't commit the crime.
Right.
So they had to pay. They paid money to get the sanctions lifted, and they did that.
So it's like international extortion, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. JR, I want to say something. There are two things I want to make very important here to your audience out there. It's interesting that Lebanon is one of the Arab countries who led the charge for this no-fly zone, right? This so-called no-fly zone, right?
Right.
Lebanon tabled the motion, put it there, right? And it's interesting, Lebanon is a member of the Arab League, and Qatar, right, is one of the countries who have recognized the rebels. Let me tell you this. You know, they hate Lebanon, these two countries that you see in the charge, Lebanon and Qatar, and there are a few others, but let's deal with these two. See, they hate Gaddafi. They hate him. Why? You know, 2 years ago at an Arab, I think it's 2 years ago roughly, at the African Arab Summit, right? He was the only leader who came out, Arab, leading that part of the world, and made an apology for the Arab rule in this trade in captured Africans, right? Mm-hmm. He said the way that the Africans were kidnapped and treated. He said, and up to today, we have rich Arab elites and countries who are still practicing this thing against Africans, treating them in a very barbaric manner and condescending manner, right? And they hate that because Lebanon is a country, look, I think it was only 6 days ago, they had to charter 2 aircraft to take more than 600 maids from domestic workers from Madagascar back, right? There will be one black maid every week is being killed. There's no laws against discrimination there. That can't happen in Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. You see? And in Qatar, the Qataris, all of these Gulf Arabs, they're racist. They treat the Somalis, the darks, and the Sudanese and everything like trash. So when Gaddafi gets up and chastises them for their racism, right, they don't like it. They don't like it. So they're happy to see him go. They're not part of any, they want nothing to do with Africa. They're happy to go with this so-called Mediterranean bloc. And this is the reaction. So if Gaddafi is hated among them, that's an honor. He doesn't want to be in the company, you know, of these people who masquerade, call themselves Islam, or what they practice is far from Islam. They tell you, but the Ummah is one and we're all Muslims and all that garbage. But yet when you go to the Kaaba and all that, black people and people of the discriminated against, they hate that. They hate that. So they hate Gaddafi for that, because Gaddafi stand up and expose these hypocrites for what they are. So they're happy to see him go.
Can you speak a little bit about the African countries that voted also for this quote-unquote no-fly zone, or what we should call it what it is, this war on Libya?
Yes.
Gabon, Nigeria, and South Africa.
Yep, and South Africa. Well, before we get to South Africa, Gabon, the president of Gabon, his father, Muammar Bongo, was very close to that's a neo-colonial regime. This is a man, the president of Gabon, Ali Bongo. He actually rigged an election. He rigged an election, right? Got so much, the opposition came out against it, but the French and the Western powers said nothing because he's a facilitator of imperialism. You know, that is why he's one that facilitates it. The Nigerian ruling elite, they're another neo-colonial regime, right? So they will facilitate imperialist penetration and breakup of the Union. South Africa, the ANC, there's a lot of contradictions in the ANC, right? And as a Pan-Africanist, from years ago, we know that there's nothing Pan-African about the ANC. The ANC has never had a Pan-African vision. The Pan-African vision was from the PAC and AZAPO and the BCM founded by Steve Biko and so. So what you find today now in South Africa is you might got Jacob Zuma standing there as the president and influencing, but within a lot of the people who were once supporters of apartheid, they're now in the ANC. Many of them are in the ANC. And there's a big row in the ANC right now over the position that was taken in voting for this so-called no-fly zone. You know, so, you know, it's a shame. It's a shame. And countries like, you know, I expected countries like Gabon and Nigeria, but not South Africa. This is a country that when they called, the man Gaddafi answered. You know, Libya and Cuba contributed to that struggle tremendously to abolish apartheid. Many fighters from the ANC, AZAPO, they were financed, educated, trained in Libya, sent to Mozambique and so to fight the apartheid regime. And you know, I'm really appalled that Jacob Zuma's government can support that. Yes. These are some of our problems and contradictions that we have to deal with. You know, one great black scholar said, you know, in Africa what we have is leaders in Africa, but we don't have African leaders. It's a different thing.
For those of you who are just tuning in, we are talking to Gerald Pereira, a journalist, as well as someone who has lived and worked extensively throughout the Libyan country. Gerald, can you talk a little bit about the activity or inactivity of the African Union? How has the African Union responded to the president of the African Union's country being bombed?
Yeah, well, brother, I just want to say this. I just got I've been reading a statement issued by the People's Empowerment Movement of Barbados, the Pan-African movement, and they're calling right now for all the governments in the Caribbean, different places to stand up, right? And they're calling on the African Union to be more proactive, to get out there and to get the hostilities, imperialist aggression against Libya to be stopped. And they're calling on the African Union. Now, some of the African Union countries, I think, led by Uganda, I think Senegal, I think a few others are getting together, but I don't know what's happening. I haven't heard anything more. But they need to, I think this, they need to come out openly and take a solid stand. It's interesting that this so-called international conference that is going on in London, we're seeing at the table, I've seen only the Europeans and these racists that you have in the Arab states too, who are there. And some movements who should be ashamed to refer to themselves as Islamic movements, But I think the African Union should have, the African Union needs to really get its act together and take a very solid stand here against an African country and against a Pan-African leader that is being,